Greetings, testing enthusiasts. Prepare to embark on a journey into the heart of software testing with humans of testing. Join us as we shine spotlight on the remarkable individuals shaping digital reliability. From seasoned veterans to rising stars, discover the human side of testing as we delve into their unique journeys and insights. Welcome to the world behind the code. Today, we are thrilled to introduce you to the enigmatic figure known as Automation Panda. A global advocate for software quality, they have revolutionized testing with their innovative Boa Constrictor pattern and 4 courses at Test Automation University. Follow their journey as we uncover the secrets behind their success and unravel the mysteries of code. Hi, Andrew. Welcome to our latest episode of Humans of Testing. Um, to start with, can you please tell us something about yourself, like an introduction from yourself?
Sure. And thank you for inviting me, Avisha. And hello, everyone. My name is Andy Knight. I'm the Automation Panda. I am your quintessential software engineer and test. I've been doing that for way too long. Um, right now, I am currently principal architect at Cycle Labs, where I'm helping to build out a test automation platform for supply chain and warehouse management solutions. I love testing automation, BDD, development, you name it. I go around the world. I talk at conferences. I write blogs. And I do interviews like this.
You just said Automation Panda. So can you please share the story behind your alias and like how it reflects your journey and passion for software quality?
Sure, absolutely. So the way I came up with it was I needed to register a domain name when I was starting to blog back in 2016, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, it was popular. You would name a project or a thing after either a fruit or, no, sorry, not a fruit, a vegetable like cucumber or an animal. And so I thought long and hard. I'm like, well, there's enough Andrew Knights in this world, but I need something catchy. And so I'm like, well, what am I going to talk about? Testing and automation.
Mm-hmm.
Automation. What's an animal that I like and everyone else likes? Panda. Boom. And so I became the Automation Panda. And now here we are.
Okay, but in my opinion, like pandas are a little clumsy, and they are not very alert and aware of their surroundings and stuff. Like they,
Wow.
their survival skills are the lowest of all the. Right?
Well, you're not wrong. But everybody loves pandas.
Yeah, that's true.
So everyone, I was going for popularity.
Yeah, that's nice. Interesting. Andrew, as the principal software architect at Cycle Labs, what unique challenges and opportunities do you encounter in the realm of test automation for supply chains and warehouse management?
Sure. So supply chain is a rather underserved domain within software development. I kind of always joke whenever I go to testing conferences, you see people all along the bell curve. You got FANG companies way bleeding edge. You've got most of the software companies kind of on that like upper end of the bell curve. On the back slopes in order, you've got banks, then insurance, and then medical. And a lot of times I don't even see or hear of supply chain people in and around the public community. And the reason why is because a lot of places are on older systems, more legacy platforms.
Hmm.
Not to say that's bad. They trust the tried and true, right?
Mhm.
Why do I need to update if my things are working, right?
Yeah.
And so it's the challenges that we face in supply chain for testing and automation tend to be dealing with enterprise level software,
Hmm.
right? Much like there's Salesforce for CRM, there are platforms like Manhattan and Kerber and Blue Yonder for WMS. WMS meaning warehouse management system,
Hmm.
right? So people aren't necessarily making their own software; they're working on top of this existing enterprise platform, and we're testing on top of that too,
Hmm.
right? So there's that challenge. There's also a challenge of given that some of these are older systems, like, hey, we need to run tests on Windows machines running Internet Explorer. And
Hmm.
most of us in testing would be like, you're still on Internet Explorer? What do you mean? And they're like, of course, what else would we be doing? And you're like, oh, okay. Or it's that, they built a system 10,
Yeah.
15 years ago that's still in production that they still need to maintain. And they don't have the luxury of getting off of it, right? It's kind of flippant for someone like us to come in and say, well, just get off of that. It's like, well, we can't. We
Hmm.
can't. Right. Um, and so we deal with a lot of those challenges. And also an interesting thing in supply chain and warehouse is that these systems that are under test aren't necessarily like pure software systems either. It's not like, oh, I have a web app that I load up and I do my playwright tests through. It's like, okay, well, we have a warehouse that has little robots zipping around, and we have people with scanners walking around, and it's multi-platform in that there's a web component, there's a mobile component, there's physical hardware components, there's green screen terminals, like really old school, and they all have to work seamlessly together. And so we're automating not so much features on an application, but rather workflows through a complex system, right?
Got
So
it.
that's what it looks like in warehouse management.
Got it. It sounds a bit complicated, and as you said that most of them are still stuck with old tech. Like they are actually the Internet Explorer of testing, we can say. So,
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to say most, but I would say a lot, right?
so what do you think? Like, what can be done to help them overcome such challenges or help them improve from the technology basis on that side?
Sure. Well, cycle labs can help. But more generally, right? I joke. But I think the things that would help are first of all, understanding that to stay up and to stay ahead, to get that advantage within, handling all their inventory in their systems. Focusing on mitigating risk as the main purpose of quality,
Mm.
right? There a lot of these folks running warehouses tend to be rather risk averse, and the big reason why is because they've got different incentives, right? They want to make sure that when the new iPhones come out, they can ship them all out, right? They want to make sure that they can get the candy bars on your store shelves,
Mhm.
right? And if anything happens that messes up that whole process, it turns into like dollars and angry people. And so they need to have that really good, solid reliability in the systems. And so if they're going to make upgrades, if they're going to try to eke out improvements, they really need to be mindful of that risk and thus put in place, let's say, automated systems for verification, right? It's unrealistic to say, okay, we're going to take a weekend and all hands on deck or in the warehouse making sure everything flips through, right? You need to test early and often,
Hmm.
right? And so for companies in supply chain and warehouse management space to adopt this quality driven mindset is kind of a new thing, right? There from their perspective, it's like we're not testers, we're not even software people. We're
Yeah.
literally like shippers, we're
Yeah.
movers,
Yeah.
we're inventory,
Mhm.
we're pushing product. This testing that just you do it for me, like um
Yeah, that is not the core business, or something
correct,
gives them money.
correct,
Hmm.
right? And so they need to, I think it would help to at least acknowledge like, oh, hey, if we were more quality forward in our thinking, what does that translate into our risk mitigation activities, right? And then how can that empower us to move faster with change?
Hmm.
That would be huge.
Got it. Um, so like as I would want, like I am also interested in like how did you become interested in software testing and quality assurance? Like
Mm-hmm.
what was what was that moment where you got okay, this is something I want to do for the
Mm.
next 20 or
Sure.
30 years of my life as a
Good.
profession?
Mm-hmm. Sure. No, it's a good question, and I can tell you honestly, like I would have never predicted this path for myself. It's rather unexpected, but here I am, and I fell into it kind of out of necessity, really. When I was in college, I did internships with IBM,
Mm-hmm.
and my very first internship was I was on a testing team. And at that point, I'm like, you're paying me how much per hour to come work for you? This is more money than I've ever seen in my life. This is as an intern. Oh my gosh, right? I will do whatever you want me to. You want me to paint the walls? I'll paint the walls, you know? And so it was a testing job, and I was doing test automation before it was cool. This is summer of 2007. You
Ah,
know, subsequent internships at IBM, I did other things. I did development, I did Buildmeister, I did all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Agile, DevOps, when that was still new, right? But then I really came back to it a year post college graduation. I graduated 2010, went back to IBM, did a different team. Ooh, that was a rough experience. But then my manager went to another company, NetApp, and after a few months, he was like, "Hey, Andy, we got an opening over here on my QA team. You want it?" I was like, "Anything, get me out of here!" Right. So I went to NetApp, and that was a platform QA team. Their charter was to test where hardware meets software. NetApp they built large scale rack mounted data storage devices.
Mhm.
And so the main software product was the operating system for these servers.
Okay.
And so I was making sure the operating system low level commands like BIOS and firmware and stuff was going to work.
Mhm.
And I spent 4 years at NetApp, and they wanted me as a new college grad because, oh, he knows how to code, right? The four other QA engineers on my team, they were more like strategy and manual testing and maybe a little bit of automation. But they're like,
Yeah.
oh, Andy, yeah, he's he's going to code for us. He's gonna really take over our test automation. And I'm just like, I will do whatever as long as it's coding, because that's not what I was doing at IBM.
Okay.
And so that's um, the through the school of hard knocks on that team is where I learned how to develop good test automation.
Okay.
And I was there long enough that I could dig in deep. And at this time, we didn't have as many of the resources to learn about
Mm,
testing and automation,
mm,
right? This was 2011, right?
mm,
There was no test automation university. There were I wasn't aware of any conferences, right? There weren't as many books on this,
mm.
right? And so and most of what NetApp was doing was rather proprietary.
Okay.
So like I had to basically learn by teaching myself and learning on the job.
Mm.
And the starting point, the test automation we had was absolute garbage. It was a dumpster fire. Like it didn't even run. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So the bar was low.
Yeah.
But I kind of made it my personal mission to be an engineer, to iterate and make it better and better and better, to the point where when I left NetApp, like I was the automation lead for one of our major operating system releases, which is typically at NetApp at that time it was an 18 to 24-month schedule. Like this is waterfall, baby. Like it's like long. So I owned automation for our team for a long time, you
Okay.
know. And yeah, like I rose from being the new college grunt to being somewhat respected, not just in my team, but throughout the organization of QA at NetApp. So that's those were like my formative years with
Okay.
testing and automation.
So, like as I am inferring that the years at IBM were very tough, but money motivated. So it started. The money was the motivation for the beginning of your journey, and then you somehow got interested and something like that.
Well, I would caution to say, like, I didn't do it for the money, right? I mean, it's
Just initially.
yeah, just in general, like you go to college and get a job because money
Yeah.
is important in our
Yeah.
capitalist
Yeah.
economy, right? More that, but yeah, like at the time where I was doing internships and graduating, I graduated in 2010. That was
Hmm.
in the wake of the 2008 global financial crisis.
Yep.
Jobs were hard to get. So the
Yep.
fact that I got a job at IBM was
That's an
amazing, right? The
achievement.
fact that there was an opening for me at NetApp where I had a connection, even more amazing.
Yeah.
So like when I say I was not picky, that's because it's like I can have this job or I can be poor and
Yeah.
unemployed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what it came. I mean, I had called up my college professor and been like, hey, should I come back and do a PhD program? And he was like, Andy, no, you have a job, you can go get another job if your current job isn't that good. I'm like, good advice. So I did.
All right. And so as you said that at IBM you didn't do coding. Were you into more strategy and stuff at IBM, or like in general?
Oh, hold on just a moment. Sorry, could you please repeat that?
Yeah, as you said that in your second job, like most of
Mhm.
the QS were into strategy and not specifically into coding. So were you one of them back in IBM when you started off?
No, 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 no. So, um, when when I was an intern at IBM, I was in Rational Software Group,
Okay.
and I worked on and basically it was a glorified Eclipse plugin where it had its own language and for business level programming. It's pretty cool. But I did like all the kinds of roles: dev, test, build
Okay.
my string. Even I wrote some tutorials for them. When I graduated and I went to IBM full time, I was in Tivoli, which was a completely different organization.
Mhm.
That job, I was a performance engineer on mainframe monitoring systems.
Okay, it sounds really
Uh,
complicated. Not sure what it is.
Yeah, I mean mainframes. That's like IBM's big, like refrigerator-sized computers that do like a bajillion banking transactions every night. But it's very old, arcane kinds of systems. College does not train you for these, and IBM did not really train me for these either. Like I didn't really know what was going on. And my job was like it was oh gosh, I don't want to complain too much because it was a job and it paid well, but like I was as the performance engineer, I was trying to time the green screens that they would refresh
Yeah.
in a certain amount of time, and I'm like, I'm sitting there at a computer screen with my stopwatch, and I'm like, this isn't it. This is not this is a career ender for me if I don't get out of this. So that's that was what I was doing before.
Seems like a dreadful experience, to be honest, by the way you shared it.
Well, again, I don't want to bemoan or complain too much about that experience. I'm thankful I had it.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing of come out with me for a drink later, and you will hear all about all the crazy things I dealt with there. Um, and also, I carry that experience forward with me in my career
Hmm.
because I want to make sure that no one ever has to go through some of the nonsense I did. Because it was pretty bad. There were some things that were pretty bad beyond just the nature of the work. Like I always like to kind of encourage folks who are newer in their career paths,
Hmm.
who are going through things like imposter syndrome, who are questioning if they've made the right choices in life, um, to, to encourage them, like, hey, it's okay, right?
Yeah.
Because I didn't have that for me back at that time, and I wish I did.
Yep. So a helping hand always helps.
Hmm.
Although I do get a gist of what you have been through in your initial days, but the next question is going to be around that. Like, what inspired you
Hmm.
to focus on test automation excellence, like particularly in supply chains and warehouse management?
Oh, what inspired me for supply chain and warehouse management? That's an interesting question. I can't say that this might sound terrible. I can't say that I'm super passionate necessarily about supply chain and warehouse management. Um, and that's not a dig at the industry or anything.
Mhm.
Moreover, to say, I never really gravitated towards any particular domain, right? If I look back at the places I've worked, I mean, I've worked in, um, software tooling. I've worked in data storage, advertising. Well, let me qualify that. Like the ad exchanges, like all the ads that get placed on your web pages, that kind of company. I've worked at like this legal document search, right? I've worked in technically fintech. Um,
Okay.
I've worked and also at a testing tools vendor, and now I'm in supply chain. And so I've never like stuck to a particular industry or thing. What really has been my keen interest has been the the practice of good testing, good automation, and good development,
Hmm.
right? And that has been a very transferable skill throughout my entire career.
Hmm.
I feel like, if anything, I really gravitate now towards working at companies that are in the testing tool space, right?
Hmm.
Like I work at Cycle Labs now. We're a testing tool vendor, right? I used to work at Apple Tools,
Hmm.
testing tool vendor. When I go to Star East and Star West, which I'll be at next week, I crawl the expo hall and I talk with all the people at all the other testing vendors that I know. We swap notes, right? So that's more of my passion is on testing proper, automation proper. Like that's where I find the core of my value add.
Hmm. So basically, quite an array of industry experience you have, but
Mm,
testing is the core of what drives you. Yep.
bingo, bingo.
Um, I'm sorry, but circling back to your early days, so can you
Hmm.
share a memorable moment from your early days in software testing that influenced your career path?
Sure, sure. Like I remember, hmm, like one of the first times you actually see automation run, and you're like, wow, I'm steering hands off, and it's just going.
Yeah.
It is kind of magical, right? And that feeling doesn't go away.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, if I have to be blunt, I feel like I'm more interested in the automation side of things than in the testing side of things. Not to say I'm not interested in testing, but like, um, it was always the automation that really captivated me. The thought that like I can make it go, that it has unique challenges to the automation, right? Like automation is essentially a distributed system. People kind of overlook it. It's actually a very complex domain,
Hmm.
right? There's much more challenge and difficulty there than people
Yep.
will initially think and give it credit for.
Hmm.
So that spark. I mean, I remember at IBM doing like my first automated tests and just running them through. It's like, oh, you ran like 1,000 tests in like 2 minutes. I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, that's pretty cool. Thinking, wait a minute, if I were to like sit down and like do that manually each one, like, oh man, that would take me like a month.
Yeah.
Ding. Like, oh, this is really valuable.
Uh-huh.
And at that time, test automation, like I said, was not as widely practiced, right? It was still kind of earlier days.
Okay. So as an automation champion and as a software quality champion, what drives your passion for helping others build quality software?
Well, if we're going to do something, we might as well do it right.
Hmm.
We might as well build something that we're proud of. Nobody likes crappy software. Like
True.
when you click on something and it doesn't work, or you get the 404 error message, right? Um,
Yeah, been
I,
there.
I wouldn't say that I'm a perfectionist, but I would say that in whatever I like to do or whatever I want to do, I really try to do it as the best I can. I try to make it look good. I try to make sure it's reliable, robust. I mean, that's outside of software. Like if I'm cooking a meal, I want it to have this amazing presentation and to taste really good, right? If I'm working on my car, I want it to be shiny and clean.
Yep.
Um, I think that's just part of my personality and how I approach things, right? I don't want to take on something if I can't do it well.
Hmm.
And so when I come into software, it's very natural for me to want to build high quality systems, right? Um, and also another aspect of me is I tend to be very pragmatically risk averse, right?
Oh, you are.
In a different, I don't know. I mean, just I'm very keen to like find out all the ways something could go wrong, right?
Okay.
And so what do? I am prepared against all those possible scenarios. It's like Boy Scout motto: be prepared. In
Uh-huh.
another life, maybe I could have been an insurance agent. I don't know. But so when I approach testing, it's like, okay, I can very intuitively think of all the ways this particular thing could go wrong. Let me make
Yeah.
sure we catch all of these early. And so yeah, that just naturally fits for me in testing.
That's really nice. The insurance thing was very funny, but yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you see the role of test automation evolving in the future? Or Look, first I would like to ask, as you said that whatever you do, if you're building something in the software domain, you might as well
Mhm.
do something good with it. So,
Mhm.
can you share a project or initiative where your focus on software quality made a significant impact on the like project or maybe the application or anything?
Hmm. Made a significant impact. Do I have any good juicy stories? Well, I'm trying to think. It's like most of the things that I would think of, it's not like there was like this one amazing bug I found or anything like that. It's more of like, yeah, well, I worked as part of this project as part of a team, and my piece was this particular feature area, and it didn't explode, you know, and we had test coverage for it that ran nightly or continuously or whatever. I mean, I guess if there were to be like a big one, I could say would be my time at Precision Lender. I was there 2018 through 2021.
Mhm.
Um, Local company here in Raleigh got bought out by another company called Q2. But I was hired to be their first software engineer test. They were like an engineering organization. Everyone's a software developer. They never had hired a specialized role before, but when they hired me, I was the first software engineer in test, and they're like, "Your charter, Andy, make the test automation happen." I said, "Okay," from the ground up, right? And so, like over my time there, we went from zero to full continuous testing,
Hmm.
right? We were able to what they did was Precision Lender is a commercial lending web application. So like if you were a business and you wanted to get a loan to build an apartment complex or to buy a fleet of trucks to haul things across the country, right? You would go to your commercial banker, not your personal banker, and try to negotiate loan terms. And this was an application for the banker to help them come up with the best pricing and terms and everything. And so it was a very complex web application. Like it didn't have too many pages, but boy, did it have a whole bunch of different kinds of data and formulas. And so the fact that there was like zero black box or end-to-end testing on that before I got there, they were letting bugs slip all the time, and it was becoming unsustainable. Right? It was the startup that was so successful they're starting to hit the mid-sized company problems. Um, and so when I came in there, it's like we I created a test project for that application that was rather scalable. Right? We got it running continuously as well as nightly on a bunch of different product configurations because the config data behind that was wow. Um, and it was regularly catching issues in CI.
Yeah.
Developer pushes the change, it goes off. It takes 15, 20 minutes to go through the full pipeline as well as running the tests, and then it'll come back and be like, "Oh yeah, we had some failures here." And you look at it, it's like, "Oh shoot, that's a bug," right? Wow. So to see that actually happen in real time was
Hmm.
really cool. And to see it like, oh, it wasn't like um, it was like a week or two or three after a developer pushed a change. It was like immediate, repeatedly. So that was cool.
Okay. That's impressive though. So how do you see the role of test automation evolving in the future of software development?
Mm, mm. Good question. Automation is here to stay. It's not
Yep.
going anywhere. The way in which teams pursue automation, I think, will be changing, though. There's, uh, I know that AI technologies are all the rage right now, right?
Hmm.
And if you look at any given testing vendor, they all have some sort of AI component to their solutions that they're pushing. It's like it is what it is.
Yep.
Um, I think what's going to happen is a lot of these testing companies are that are the vendors in this space. They're going to start to pivot away from marketing AI for AI's sake and pushing more into the generative capabilities. Like, hey, can this help me write a better test case? Can
Hmm.
this help me be run my tests more reliably? Can it help me analyze my results more quickly? As well as entering into autonomous testing, where rather than a human needing to spend so much of their time figuring out writing what the test case is, that there would be these agents that could go look at a system and recommend test cases and then say, hey, do you want me to run these? And the human says yes. And then it goes off and just runs them and then gives back results. I think that's where we're going to see the bleeding edge of automation go. At the same time, though, I don't think that's going to eliminate the more traditional ways people write automation. Like, hey, I have this little web app. I just need to write some playwright tests to make sure that everything checks out. I don't think that's going away. And the reason why is because the complexities of the technology along with the cost, right?
Yeah.
The reason why manual testing still happens today is because it's the easiest and cheapest thing to do. It just doesn't scale very well in terms of time, right? That's why people will spend more time and resource to develop the automated test suites to run, right? And they get the benefits there. The next level up would be, okay, well, I have to go spend expensive licenses on these additional kinds of tools, right? That others have developed. And so I think initially that's going to be, like a next level up of complexity, though over time it shall come down, but no. So that's kind of where I see things going.
With time, maybe the gap is going to get reduced by.
I think the complexity gap will get reduced, right? But the cost gap, I think, is still going to be there, right? Because in order to achieve the autonomous and generative AI solutions, either a company has to build it themselves, which is almost guaranteed not going to happen, right? Because that's so technically complex and requires so much money to train the models right. And it's not in the businesses, those companies' core business to do that, right? They'd rather buy the solution. So it's up to vendors to provide those solutions, and vendors are not going to be giving that out for free. So it's like, okay, it's going to become a pay to win, right? You're a small startup, you're leader at a small startup, you're trying to figure out what are the best tools to help testing here. And so it's like, okay, do I pay for licenses for these really advanced tools? Because hopefully in the future they'll demonstrate their value, right? Or do I go lean and take a more traditional test automation approach and use the free open source frameworks like Playwright and Cypress and stuff? And that's where I think the tension is going to be in automation. And I don't know how all that's going to shake out, but I don't envision that there's going to be, really good models for the AI based testing technologies just given out like Halloween candy. I don't see that happening.
Okay. So, as an advocate of open source software, what motivated you to become a Playwright ambassador and lead developer of Boa Constrictor?
Sure. So I think there's actually 3 questions there. Why open source? Why Boa Constrictor? And why Playwright?
Yeah.
So I'll answer the why open source talk first. I strongly believe in the value of open source software, because with open source software, meaning projects that anybody can access, read the source of, replicate themselves, add to, take, whatever. Like there are so many. No problem is new. No problem is new. If you are facing a problem with something, someone else somewhere has probably faced that as well, And so if we look in aggregate at everyone on this planet reinventing the same solutions to the same problems, that's a lot of waste, of wasted time, wasted energy, wasted money. And open source software is probably one of the best ways in human history that we've been able to avoid reinventing wheels, right? And that is an aggregate positive for the world economy, right? The fact that these common problems have common solutions that we can all share and build on top of, because it's like if you're a company trying to solve a problem, right? If you can get the foundation of what you need for free and then build your problem on top of that, rather than having to build the foundation first, you can move a lot more quickly and solve the more interesting things, right? And I know like any software engineer or anyone who's ever coded will be able to tell you of an open source project they've used that's been amazing for them, that saved them so much time, that they love, right? And I think on the flip side of that, being in software, we also have a duty to give back to that. It's not just a one-way street of consuming it, but if we are capable, then we have this general sense of duty that, okay, yeah, I've solved a problem too.
Hmm.
Here, let me give this back.
Yep.
And so like, and I get the sense that most software people feel the same way. I know I'm not unique in that. I've even given a talk called Open Testing, where I look at open source and how it compares to the testing world and how we can be more open in the testing space. So
Hmm.
anybody wants to see that, check that out. So that's why open source. Why Boa Constrictor? Well, my beliefs about open source software ultimately led to Boa Constrictor. When I was at Precision Lender, building up that project that I talked about previously, the technology stack we chose was .NET. We
Hmm.
were writing tests in C Sharp. We were using SpecFlow as our framework, which is a BDD test framework, and we were using Selenium WebDriver as our browser automator. This was in the time before Cypress had taken things over, right? Selenium was still kind of the way. And when I was developing this test project, in my previous project, I had used pretty much the exact same stack,
Hmm.
but we used page object model for our interactions with web pages, and it was absolutely terrible. The way it turned out was just total garbage. And I'm like, I'm not doing that again. What's a better way? And so I
Hmm.
learned about the screenplay pattern, which is a bit complex at first, but once I wrap my head around it, it was like light bulb goes off. Ding! Oh, this is amazing, right?
Yeah.
The problem was at that time there was no really good implementation of screenplay in C Sharp. The two major implementations were from the Serenity project, and they were in Java and JavaScript. And I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to make it happen in C Sharp. I'm going to do this on my own because I know even though I have to spend a little more time writing boilerplate code to get started for my project,
Hmm.
ultimately it's going to pay dividends. My project is going to be so much better in the long term. And it still is to this day. That project is still going full steam ahead.
That's incredible.
Long after I've left, I still have contacts there who work on it. And so I implemented Screenplay in .NET.
Hmm.
And initially it was just internal, but
Hmm.
then I realized, like, wait a minute, this could be something that we release as an open source project to the
Hmm.
world.
Hmm.
And excuse me, I had first suggested that to one of the VPs at that company, like, within a year of me joining, and he was like, right. But then in 2020, I remember our chief product officer reached out to me. He's like, Andy, how can we achieve radical transparency with our customers through some of the quality and testing stuff you're doing? And I was like, we can open source part of it. He's like, do it. I'm like, he's taller than him. I'll do it. And so we released Boa Constrictor as an open source project in October of 2020 as part of the Hacktoberfest
Yeah.
event. And so, yeah, and Boa Constrictor is still out there. It's still an active project. We've got, it's not just people, it's not just me, and it's not just other people at that old company. There's people from around the world who now have contributed, who use it. It's got, well over 100,000 downloads on NuGet. So it's a small project, but it's had an impact. And what I've seen in the testing industry since that time over the past couple of years is that, I fell in love with Screenplay. I started tooting its horn all over the place. And that seemed to have really reignited discussion around the screenplay pattern in our testing community. And I feel like I helped inspire that. Yes. Right. So that's why Boa Constrictor.
Nice.
Um,
So, can you share your experience contributing to the open source projects and like how it has shaped your perspective on software development?
sure. So um, there've really been two kinds of projects that I've contributed to with open source. One of which was Boa Constrictor. That
Yeah.
was dominant for me for like the longest time.
Yeah.
Um, the other kind of projects that I've done for open source have been like when I've given a talk or tutorial I'll put the repository out there on GitHub, and so that people can see the example code and they can try it themselves. So it's not typically what people think of when they think of like contributing to an open source project, but that's kind of what I've done. There have been a couple other times where there's some project out there in the ether where I use it, and then I notice there's like a small bug, or there's some documentation missing. And so what I'll do is I'll fork the repository, do a very small pull request, and contribute that back. Very small peanuts. Nothing major, nothing to brag about. Like literally the smallest piece you could imagine. Um, yeah, so that's what my open source contributions have looked like.
So it doesn't matter how small your contribution it is still a contribution and it can lead to something big. So every contribution
True.
is, yeah.
Every contribution counts. Yes,
Yeah.
amen.
Yeah. So, one more question. How do you engage with the testing community through conferences, webinars, and workshops?
Sure. Is that a question of how I do it myself, or is this my advice for encouraging other people to do it?
We would like you to answer both.
Okay,
Perspective
sure,
of
sure.
in both the parts.
Understood. So, I've been involved both in the testing world as well as the Python world. I kind of do both of those communities. And really, I got into it just because I wanted to, right? I wanted to speak, I wanted to meet people. And so, like, I started looking like, hey, what events are out there? Right? Google, maybe now you could go to ChatGPT or something, right? And then you meet people, and then they tell you about other things going on, and you keep doing it, and it's great. And I just kind of came into it rather organically. I mean, my main impetus was like the speaking and the sharing, right? But if there's anybody out there who's like, how do I get started with this?
Hmm.
Honestly, like look for local meetups in your area. Look at local and regional events wherever you may be. Like if you're in India, there's tons of events all the time,
Hmm.
right? Here in the United States, I have regularly attended Star East and Star West, major testing conferences. I'll be keynoting QA or the Highway in Ohio in June, which would be a lot of fun. I just got back from Texas, which is a Python event located in Austin, Texas. And so you find these things and you just engage, show up, participate. It's the best advice I can give.
Hmm. Nice. Showing up matters again. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, all right. Something about your writing and publication. So, how do you balance your roles as a developer, advocate, and educator in the software testing community?
Mm-hmm. So I think for myself, whenever I develop content anymore, now that I'm not a developer advocate, right? I don't have somebody there. I don't have my boss telling me, you must do this, you must do that, right? Um, I really focus on content that I care about, that I'm interested in. So if there is a stroke of inspiration that comes to me, I'll write a blog article. In fact, the other day I just posted a new article on automationpanda.com about one of my experiences from IBM and how I learned to trust my testing instincts. You know, I don't have an agenda to push with my content, right? I write from here, from what's inside. I feel like I have this burning things inside of me to share things, right?
You sound
And
like
but that really tends to be the source of my strength in my content. There's a lot of people who say I'm going to write a blog, and they write an article or two, and it dies, right? Nothing ever gets posted again. Um, but me, if you look at like my history, I keep going and going. I'm the Energizer Bunny, and it's because I care, and it's because I choose topics that I am personally interested in. That's why I'm in the Python community. I don't even do Python at my day job. I haven't done Python at my day job for most of my career, but I like the language and I like the community, and so I spend a lot of my content in that space. You know, and so if there's others out there who are interested in getting into blogging
Hmm.
or speaking or making videos, that kind of thing. What I would say is, um, that's great, Make sure you're doing it because you want to. Make
Hmm.
sure that you're producing the content that you're interested in, that you are passionate about.
Hmm.
Um, if you're doing it purely because you want to earn money as a speaker, well, you picked the wrong path, right?
Yep.
If you're doing it because you like want to get ad revenues off your videos, you're not going to make anything. Like, right, right. Yeah, you have to have that more organic desire, that innate drive, and if you lean into that, then success will follow.
Yeah, I think apart from passion, consistency also matters. Like one can
Mm,
try and write everything which they love and which they are passionate about, but they, maybe publish one or two blogs and then they are just um MIA for a few months or maybe years, and then they
hmm.
pop back again. Like, why am I not getting any traction on my blogs, or why am I not there?
Well,
So consistency matters apart from
yeah,
passion.
I think that's a matter of people's goals too, right? If somebody is trying to become an influencer, right, then absolutely consistency matters, because if you're consistently posting, you get that following and it goes and goes, right? I mean, I don't know how many different sources on YouTube will tell you like, oh, the most important thing is not the quality of your video, it's the fact that you post like twice a week, right?
Yeah.
But I would caution against that, because not everyone within software necessarily wants to become a content creator or become an influencer or
Hmm.
become a speaker,
Hmm.
right? There's plenty of people who may want to write a blog only occasionally because they found something worth sharing,
Hmm.
right? And it's more for them to record that, and for those around them with whom they like to share that, you
Hmm.
know. So I would say to folks out there, like, it's okay to not pressure yourself. If you really don't have anything to write about, or you really don't want to write all the time, it could be okay that maybe you have a blog you post a couple times a year, if you are okay with that. you
Hmm.
know not everybody is meant to be a superstar. Not everybody is meant to be like keynoting every freaking conference in the world. Like, ugh. For people who do that, unfortunately, like me, it's a very tiring journey,
Hmm.
right? There's a lot of good that comes out of that, but there's also a lot it takes out of you. There are things that, if you want to pursue that track, you're not going to have time to do otherwise.
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know and so it's not for everybody. And same thing, like you had mentioned, developer relations, that whole role in and of itself is not for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, Andrew, reflecting on your roles at Cycle Labs, Test Automation University, and Apply Tools, what are some
Hmm.
key lessons you have learned about test automation and quality assurance?
Key lessons I have learned. um, Key lesson number one: nobody likes big scary test cases. Nobody likes big, scary test cases. Um, that's not even something I've learned from my recent jobs. That's just everywhere.
The
Like,
title of this video is Nobody Likes Big Test Cases.
well, think about it. Like, anytime that you've got a test case,
Yeah.
right? It should be short, sweet, to the point, right?
Hmm.
Hey, I want to cover this behavior. This
Hmm.
is precisely how it works in this context. Boom, done. Move
Hmm.
on to the next one.
Hmm.
But like right now, I'm on a project where I am going through libraries of tests that are, when you count them up, like hundreds of lines long. And I'm not talking like automation. I'm talking like step by step procedures,
Hmm.
hundreds of lines long. And it's like, I like to think I'm a fairly intelligent individual, but I'm reading this and I'm like, what the heck is going on? I am confused, you know? And it shouldn't be that way. Tests should be plainly obvious to any common sense person.
Hmm.
We write software for people. If
Yep.
people can't understand it, we did something wrong,
Yeah. It's a
right? And how can you surface that? Well, can you understand the tests for it?
hmm.
If you can, you're on the right track. If you can't comprehend your test, you did something wrong,
Hmm.
either in the test or in the product, one or the other, right? And and yeah, like, and think about this. Like, would you want to be assigned to run a set of test cases that were arcane, that were complicated, that were difficult to understand, right? That took a long time to get through, that were ambiguous on what should be right and wrong. No, nobody wants that. That job sucks. I
Hmm.
do everything in my career to stay away from that job, you know? So why are we doing that? Why are we producing tests like that?
Hmm.
Why are we making ourselves suffer? Why are we making the next person suffer?
Hmm.
No. Don't do that. Do it better.
Yep. So, basically, this is the first key lesson which you have learned. The second would be
Oh my gosh. Say, man, I don't know if I can quantify like the most important number one, two, three lessons off the top of my head, but I can certainly give important ones.
Mhm.
Um, uh, I would say recognize that test automation is more difficult than you think.
Hmm.
A lot of teams, a lot of places, um, they overlook just how much work it takes to have a really solid automated suite of tests that can run on demand or on trigger,
Hmm.
right? And the reason why is because test automation essentially is a distributed system, and it requires full development skills to keep it going, regardless of the tools you use, right? Whether it's coded or codeless tools, whether it's AI backed or not. Um, like you think about it, like I'm talking black box automation, not like unit test. It's like you have the system under test, you
Hmm.
have the automation code itself or the project or whatever. That's the automation code is running on a different machine, right? It's and depending on how much you're trying to scale up, it could be farming out tests to any sort of number of other machines in a grid. It could be running through a CI system, which is different, right? You have all these various and sundry parts running in real time, and with that distributed nature, you have timeouts, you have race conditions, you have what if this thing just goes down and the whole thing blows up,
Hmm.
right? You know, all that to consider. Let alone how do you actually write a good test case like we just talked about? You want to write one of those big scary test cases on there, watch it fail so fast and hard, right? So in order to do test automation well, because it is so fragile, it's like you need to be top notch in your quality just to develop the system to be robust and to give you value,
Hmm.
right? It's very very difficult, and so like if you're a bona fide estet, like you have to be a good developer, like full on like software engineer. You have to have a little bit of, or have a lot of tester skills, right? And you also have a little DevOps skills sprinkled in there. Um, and to overlook that will spell disaster for any automation effort you try to launch, right? Your projects will turn out like goop. You won't get to continuous testing. You might be stuck nightly or weekly. And what you'll find is that, like, if you don't build your system well, you're going to have all sorts of flaky failures left and right. And it's going to kill any value you hope to get of moving faster with test automation.
Hmm. Got it.
Yeah, deep.
Uh, so, another question on like on the same tones, like how do you approach consulting to help teams with testing, automation, and behavior-driven development?
How do I approach consulting to help people? Um, I think the most important thing is listen first. Every team is on a journey with their development efforts, with their testing efforts. Um, it's not about hitting some arbitrary watermark.
Hmm.
It's about improving from where they're at, you know. Um, and so, if let's say there's a team that has a, a sub team of manual testers,
Hmm.
right? They're really good at understanding the product. They're really good at exploratory testing about finding things, finding problems, seeing where things break, communicating with the team. But they just need to move faster, and so they want to um, let's say they want to automate some of their tests, right? For them to get to the next level of maturity is, hey, maybe for them it's find a good codeless tool that
Hmm.
can integrate with their test case management system, and then they can automate, maybe 2 dozen tests from their suite, and that saves them, that speeds up their release cycles by a day. So instead of spending 5 business days, they spend 4 business days every month
Hmm.
preparing for a release. That might seem kind of trivial or unimpressive to those of like very high automated coverage, blah blah blah, but to them it's revolutionary,
Yep.
right? That's a big jump for a team like that, and that's good for them,
Hmm.
right? We shouldn't criticize them, be like, "Oh, you're so slow." No, that's a big step for them, and
Hmm.
it's going to deliver serious value for that organization. You know, so or like on the flip side, let's say that you have a team of developers and they have, I don't know, a playwright test suite with like 200 web tests, right? And they're like, well, how can we, it takes about, 20 minutes to run. I want to get this down to 5 minutes. What do we have to do?
Hmm.
So, okay, well, let's instead of just scaling up, let's scale out. Let's distribute these, let's partition, get them across different nodes, stitch up the results at the end, maybe put in a dashboard to accumulate the results. Oh, wow, and so now they can really run continuously,
Hmm.
right? Different worlds, but we're always trying to move that needle forward. And so to listen to people, to see where they're at and what challenges they're facing, to then give advice and guidance to get to that next level of scale if the business justifies it, right? And to really focus on not so much how can you run faster, how can you run more tests, but to be like, okay, what is the real goal here?
Hmm.
You know, we don't test for testing's sake. What are you trying to do? Well, I'm trying to reduce the number of days it takes to release, right? So that we can get the thing out faster. Or I'm trying to provide more coverage in less time so that my developers can really get feedback immediately and then fix on the spot versus have to wait until the next day and interrupt their workflow, right? You define goals in what's important for the business and work backwards from there.
Hmm. Got it. So, like you have mentioned your proficiency in Python, Java, and JavaScript. So, how do you leverage these languages in your work? And do you have a favorite for test automation?
Oh gosh, I mean, my favorite language all around, including test automation, is Python.
Okay.
Absolutely. Number two is probably C sharp.
Okay.
Um, Recently, I've been doing a lot of Golang. Wow. Anyway, um, but
Is it
yeah,
dreadful experience too? Golang.
well, Golang is very limited by design,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm used to languages like Python and C sharp that give you all the goodies,
Hmm.
and Golang is like a desert. It's like you do it this way. You don't get no choice. You want to do something fancy, do it yourself.
Okay.
Okay. It has advantages,
Yeah.
right? It's just that I'm acclimating, if you know what I mean.
Uh-huh. Yeah. You have
Mm.
your own comfort zones in languages.
Yeah, I mean, I've always seen myself as a polyglot. Like I taught myself to program on a graphing calculator, for crying out loud. I did my formative experiences as a programmer in Java back in the 2000s because that was the language of choice back then.
Hmm.
And I've touched a bunch of other languages. I think I've created programming languages, like in college and stuff. And at NetApp, we created a domain specific testing language.
Yeah.
CycleScript is a domain specific language.
Yeah.
So like, I'm very well. I feel like I'm very well versed in different kinds of languages, paradigms of programming, syntax, yada yada yada. So I
Hmm.
tend not to be too picky
Hmm.
about it. It's like if I'm approaching a product or a project or a team, it's like, okay, what are you using for this? Fine, I'll pick it up, right? If I have my druthers, I'm probably going to pick Python or C sharp because that's who I am. It's like if I'm the benevolent dictator, but that's often not the case. So meh.
Impressive. Impressive. So, can you share an instance where you had to quickly pick up a new language or technology for a project?
Yep, I remember one of my internships at IBM, summer 2008. Like, Andy, you're doing JavaScript this summer. I said, okay, give me the book. 3 days later, I was programming in it.
Ah, nice.
Yep.
That's really, really impressive, Andrew. So yeah, fairly intelligent, I would say. 3 days for JavaScript. So,
Well,
um,
JavaScript was a lot different back in 2008 as well. It's, yeah, it was all right.
okay. So, as someone deeply involved in test automation, how do you envision the role of artificial intelligence in shaping the future of testing?
Yeah, so I see AI helping to take care of a lot of the annoying things that folks have to do in testing. Things like um, figuring out all the different variations for different test cases.
Hmm.
Things like improving the robustness of tests. Things like analysis and triage of results. And like I said before, hopefully someday to really move into more autonomous testing,
Hmm.
where these tools can really just kind of do the testing for us, and
Hmm.
we can, not that we're eliminated as humans, but that we can kind of focus on more interesting aspects of testing, ask more of the why, focus more on the behavior and less on the mechanics.
Hmm. The strategy thing.
Mm, yes.
Yeah. So, like, can you share any experiences or experiments where you have conducted AI-driven testing approaches, or and the potential benefits or challenges of AI-driven testing?
Sure. So this space is kind of new, and I'm sure a lot of people probably haven't done a whole lot with AI in testing yet. Most people would probably be like they got some tool from a vendor, or they work for a vendor building it. For my case, like where I really first touched AI with testing was at Apple Tools, right? Apple Tools is a visual testing tool. They use visual AI to map out how things compare,
Hmm.
and so it was a very specific use of AI technology.
Mm-hmm.
It's rather different from a lot of the Gen AI stuff that's out there now. But I mean, most visual testing comparison tools were garbage before. It was like, how many pixels different are you? Here's a percentage. Like that doesn't help you. Whereas like with visual AI, you could look and be like, okay, well this button moved here.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's actually really cool. I was able to identify that because now I can know like, is that good or bad? And I can make a choice as a human.
Huh.
And so that was where I really learned, like, wait a minute, automation doesn't need to be just this rote checker where it's like it tries a thing, and if it doesn't meet exact expectations, you pass or fail, right? But that there is richness in what you are verifying. And
Yeah.
so sometimes like the where automation should stop is just present you with the difference, and you rely on the human to step in and make the choice of goodness or badness. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Hmm. Nice. And like apart from software, you worked on vintage Volkswagens. So how do you balance your passion for technology with other interests and hobbies?
Oh my gosh. You need to have a life outside of work. You really do. I mean,
Yeah.
there's days where I'm like, it's 5:30. I could do more. I'm putting this down and I'm going to go work on other things because work can eat you alive. And then that's not just in software, that's in anything.
Hmm.
Um, so you got to make time for yourself.
Hmm. And
Mm,
and like, what do you hope readers gain from your tech blog, automationpanda.com?
mm, mm. More than anything, I hope they gain inspiration,
Hmm.
right? Like I love it when people when I can help people figure out a little tech problem, or kind of shift their mind and how they think about certain things. But really I want people to be inspired to say, "Hey, I can solve this problem. I can do testing. I can do automation. Um, and I can do it well."
Hmm.
That's what I really want people to get out of it.
Got it. So, any final words of wisdom or advice for professionals striving to excel in software testing and quality assurance?
Just do it. Don't put off testing. Don't ignore it. It's not that bad. Um, yeah, that's what I would say.
And Like, where can people find more about your work and stay updated with your latest projects and initiatives?
Sure, sure. So the best way to find me is if you just Google Automation Panda, I will be there.
Yeah.
They can go to my blog, automationpanda.com.
Hmm.
They can find me on Twitter or X or whatever Elon's calling it now. My handle is at Automation Panda. They
Hmm.
can connect with me on LinkedIn, Andrew Leland Knight. Boom, you'll find me. If people want to catch me in person, like follow me on those other things, I'll say like, hey, I'm going to be here this weekend or whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll be at Star East next week in Orlando, Florida. I'll be at QA or the Highway later this summer. I'll be at PyCon US in May. So plenty of ways to keep in touch.
That's really impressive. Your schedule seems very packed, right, for the coming weeks.
Spring is busy, always is.
All right, Andrew. Thank you so much for accepting our request to feature on Humans of Testing by TestGrid. And any final words for the community? Any advice?
Cool. I mean, I would say everyone, thank you for listening and be excellent in all things.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you for joining us on this captivating journey through the world of testing. We hope you have gained valuable insights and inspiration from the stories shared by our guest, Andrew Knight. If you are feeling inspired to take your testing skills to the next level, do check out TestGrid, your go to testing companion. Keep the testing spirit alive, keep exploring, and happy testing. See you next time.